Testing. Testing 1, 2, 3. Let's talk Nosferatu. So I saw Nosferatu on opening night, Christmas Day night. It's more in the afternoon. I mean, what else is a chick like me supposed to do on Christmas Day but to spend it watching a really scary horror movie? So let me just say before I share my thoughts that I have been looking forward to this movie since it was announced. Vampire movies have always held a special place in my heart, and Nosferatu has its own wing right next to Bram Stoker's Dracula. And if you know, like I do, then you already know what I'm talking about when I say that. Don't worry, if you don't, we'll get into that in this video essay. So, watching this version of Nosferatu was an experience for me for many different reasons. And before I really get into those reasons, let me just say off the top, Robert Eggers did not make this movie for everybody. Like, no tea, no shade or anything. I'm not trying to put anybody down for their viewing choices, but this movie is not for the casual horror movie watcher. Like, all I'm saying is that if you are the type of person who has debated the significance of the little girl with the red coat and Schindler's List, or had heated debates with your friends about the use of CGI in the Wolfman, 2010's Wolfman. I forget who stars in it. It's either Javier Bardem or the other guy that looks like Javier Bardem. Anyway, if you are a person like that, this movie is for you. On the other hand, there are aspects of this movie that if you're not a film geek such as I am, you still may like it. Let's just back up a little bit before we get into the actual movie. Let's take a little jump into the Wayback Machine, okay? So, the original Nosferatu came out in 1922. That's like a full 102 years, right? It's crazy. What's even crazier is the story behind the movie. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to spend this entire video essay talking Nosferatu history, although I could if I wanted to. That's not why we're here today. Okay, so the original Nosferatu premiered in the Netherlands in February of 1922. And then it went on to premiere at a local high society film party in March of that same year. And from there, it hit German theaters later on in March. I think like March 15th, I think. Ides of March. Funny. So when the movie premiered originally, it blew up. Got really popular really fast. It thrusted F.W. Murnau, who was previously kind of unknown as a director, into the spotlight. It also introduced the world to Max Schreck. Now, Max Schreck was the actor that played the original Count Orlok. And that is important because the special effects job done on him was so good that people did not believe that he was actually the same actor. Like, they even went so far as to suggest that Max Schreck wasn't his last name, since Schreck means terror in German or something like that. So they just thought that this handsome guy playing this big scary monster was just promotional stuff. So okay, all that's all good shit. You know, the filmmakers the talk of the town. Max Schreck is also the talk of the town. And it's all fine and good until Bram Stoker's widow, Florence Balcom, got wind of the movie. See, fun fact about Nosferatu, it is a direct ripoff of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And copyright today is about the same as it was in 1922. Copyright is copyright, you know. So if you want to make a movie that's based off of the book, you have to get the author's permission. In 1922 and today, you must get the author's permission. And Prana, the production company, never bothered to ask Bram Stoker's widow for permission, and neither did F.W. Murnau. And the really funny part about that is that F.W. Murnau was at least partially aware of what he was doing. In the script, he switches out like names, locations, that sort of thing. but the basic story is almost exactly the same. Like the only real major change, other than the fact that Count Orlok does not look like a human being, is the fact that in the end, Count Orlok perishes under sunlight, which, fun fact, that had not been done before Nosferatu. There were no Dracula anythings where Dracula dies in sunlight prior to Nosferatu, which is really ironic now because almost every adaptation uses that particular trope. So, anyway, all that being said, all the changes that F.W. Murnau made didn't mean squat. Florence Balcom ultimately won her lawsuit, and the estate ordered that all copies of Nosferatu be destroyed. Now, since we're sitting here talking about it, clearly some copies survived. Now, the how and when and everything of how they survived, I am not qualified, I don't think, to discuss. I've read a couple of articles on the path to how it got to America. Like, it first premiered again in 1929. It popped up in Detroit and New York, apparently. But, like, it was only the German version. At least that's how I understand it. The translations didn't actually come through until at least the 50s or 60s. Long story short, Nosferatu almost went away forever, just because Prana and F.W. Murnau thought it'd be better to ask forgiveness instead of permission. Okay, so fast forward to now. We are on our second remake of this movie. Actually, I think there might be a third. I heard through the grapevine that there's one floating out there with Doug Jones playing Count Orlok, but I haven't seen it, so I can't speak to it. But here we are 102 years later with the newest remake directed by Robert Eggers. And if there is one thing that is clear that you get within the first few minutes of this movie, is that Eggers really has a understanding of the history of Nosferatu in all its shapes and forms. There were these little details that I feel like if you were not already a fan of the original and knew something about the history of the original film, you probably would have missed. So, like, for one thing, one of the reasons why Max Schreck was originally cast for the part of Count Orlok is because he was 6'5", which, if you've ever stood next to somebody who was 6'5", is pretty tall. Is I would say taller than average. And that's important because the character had to tower over all of the other characters. He really had to give the appearance of a predator. That being said, Bill Skarsgård, who plays Count Orlok in the remake, isn't quite as tall, but he's 6'3". And if you've ever stood next to a 6'3" person, that's still pretty tall. I haven't looked it up. I'm willing to bet they gave him lifts too, because he looked kind of big to me. To me, he looked really like wow. And you know something? While we're on the subject of Count Orlok, the makeup, girl. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, Max Schreck's makeup job was so good that people did not believe it was Max Schreck under there. Like also another side note, people actually believed that Max Schreck was really a vampire in disguise. But all that to say that the makeup for its time was innovative, was something that had never been done before, and it freaked people out. Now, Bill Skarsgård's makeup, you know, the bummer about talking about his makeup is that I can't show you a picture of it because, at least as of the date of my recording this, there aren't any shots of him in his makeup on the internet. See, they were trying to keep it a big secret for good reason. But the makeup was okay. So I let me tell you a little something about myself to kind of give you some understanding of how good this makeup was. I have a form of prosopagnosia, or facial blindness. Now, over the course of my life, I've been able to compensate for that by picking out particular details in someone's face. That is to say that when I see someone's face, I don't see it as a whole. I see it in pieces. But being able to see it in pieces means that I'll be able to tell you from him, from her, from whoever. Typically, the more unique your features are, the better chance that I'll have to recognize you. That being said, I think that we can all agree that Bill Skarsgård's face is unique enough to where you don't have to have any form of facial blindness to recognize him in a crowd. But for the sake of this discussion, I can tell you that Bill Skarsgård's most distinguishing features, the things that stand out, are his eyes, his mouth, and his forehead. All three things were enhanced when he was Pennywise. So obviously, we can still see him in the monster that was Pennywise. Now, Orlok, on the other hand, no, not at all. Whenever they have a behind the scenes for this movie, I am really interested to see how they did his makeup because as Count Orlok, he disappeared for me completely. I could not see anything of Bill Skarsgård in that makeup. And you must understand something when I say that, how remarkable that is. From my point of view, that's never happened. It's never happened in the half a century that I've been on Earth. The years and years that I spent being able to hone this particular skill, it has never happened. Like, my biggest flex to date has been the fact that I was able to see Colin Farrell in the penguin outfit. Granted, took me a little longer to do it, but I could tell it was him under there. I'm trying to tell you guys, if I did not know ahead of time that Bill Skarsgård was playing Count Orlok in this movie, I wouldn't have known it at all. I wouldn't have known it at all. Hi, this is Future Me. While I was editing this, I realized that I didn't realize that my mic had cut out for a large chunk of this. So this part here, I was just kind of explaining how I went into the special effects, how back in the day, the original Nosferatu had all these cool special effects. One of the coolest things was even if you haven't seen the original Nosferatu, you've seen the clip of the monster rising from the grave. Well, they pay tribute to that in this movie, and it is so cool. The way that Eggers pays tribute to that is, listen, it's really freaking scary. Like, I can't front it. It's really disturbing to see. And part of the reason why it's disturbing is the reason why even if I could show you on YouTube, I can't show you on YouTube. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that he shows Nosferatu in all of his monstrous, raw self. And it is horrifying. But also, speaking of Little Orlok, we have to get into the sexuality of this film. So, okay. One of the most distinguishing and greatest thing about Dracula folklore is the sexuality of it. Like, honestly, I feel like it's the beginning of monster romance tropes. If we're going to be real about it. And hey, wait, I'm not judging anybody if you're into monster romance. Just stay with me here. Dracula and folklore has always been a sexual thing. And that is also very true of Nosferatu. And I'm going to tell you, if there's anything that's going to either repel you or awaken something in you, it's going to be the sexual subtext of this movie. And while some of it is overt, I would actually venture to say a lot of it is overt. Some of it, not so much. But all of it is in line with the folklore of Dracula. Even in the original Nosferatu, the subtext was there, this monstrous thing that's going after the sweet, lovely Ellen Hutter, lusting after her, if you will. And it's all it's all on par for a vampire movie. Like, the Dracula movies in particular have a long list of heroines and heroes who have danced with the devil. But like in every, or at least almost every instance, no matter how smooth or sexy or what kind of little purple city club glasses they're wearing, the monster is still a monster. To quote Lestat de Lioncourt, "For do not doubt, you are a killer, Louis." And that is exactly what Dracula is. He's a killer. He's a monster. He's a reprehensible beast without redemption. And yet, we openly root for him. Why do we root for him? Well, because he turns us on. Bela Lugosi, Frank Langella, Gerard Butler, all of these people have played Dracula, and every single one is some kind of awakening for somebody out there. How does all this relate to Nosferatu? Well, the interesting thing about Nosferatu, though, is that it kind of throws the monster portion in your face without taking away the sexuality. Nosferatu is just as evil and horrible and horrifying on the inside as he is on the outside. And the truly compelling thing is that it still comes off kind of hot. It's in his movements, it's in his prowess, it's in his stature, it's in the way he commands instead of asking. He is an alpha romance girlies. And if you watch this movie and you found yourself a little horrified that it was kind of turning you on, I mean, all I'm saying is that there's a reason why monster romance is popular. And hey, I'm not one to kink shame. If Nosferatu got you going, hey, I say let your freak flag fly. The point is, Nosferatu and Dracula really in general speaks to this primal nature in all of us human beings. And over the years, we've tried to sweeten it up with sparkly vampires and whatever. But at the core of what Dracula folklore is, he's still a monster, you guys. No matter how much you pretty him up, he's still a monster. Also, I can also go into the whole xenophobic subtext of the story of Dracula and Nosferatu, but I don't think I'm smart enough to do that. Plus, this video essay is long enough as it is. So let's just go into the acting. The standout in this movie, other than Bill Skarsgård, is Lily Rose Depp. You know, Johnny and Vanessa's kid. She plays Ellen Hutter, our heroine who has danced with the devil in the pale moonlight. And she is the one who becomes eternally connected to Count Orlok. Her performance in this movie is compelling. She gives so much vulnerability and just raw madness and pain and anguish to this character, and like you're captivated by her every moment that she's on screen. Like, her performance really truly is Oscar worthy. And it actually reminds me of something that I heard Joe Hill say about another actress. But one of the interesting things that he said was that the great thing about Cujo was the fact that it starred Dee Wallace Stone in a performance that was Oscar worthy. That if the movie were a drama, she would have gotten some kind of recognition for it. But because it's horror, I think that might be the same thing that happens here with Nosferatu. Like, there are a lot of really phenomenal performances in this movie. Willem Dafoe, Nicholas Hoult, I can't think of her name. She was the bald-headed chick in Deadpool versus Wolverine. Played Princess Di. All of their performances were immaculate. And really, honestly, they had to be. With this kind of story, if you gave anything less than 110, then it's going to come off as fake. So, like, all that being said, let me circle back around to my earlier statement. As great as this movie actually is, a lot of you are not going to go see it. Or if you do go see it, you probably are not going to get it. And that's a real shame, because we live in the modern era of horror films where we go to see movies that are bloody and gory and jump scary. And listen, I'm not hating on movies like that. I am a horror movie junkie. I love a good bloody, gory, jump scary movie. Wow. Not too many jump scares, but that's another video for another day. The point is, this is not the kind of horror movie that horror movies are accustomed to watching. This is the kind of horror movies that film nerds like me are accustomed to watching. And I kind of feel like that is a shame, because this is a chance for you, the viewer, to go on a journey, which is something that we don't often do in movies and our entertainment, really. The thrill of listening to someone else's story or watching someone else's story is going on the journey with them. And you get to do that in this movie. And that's what makes it so freaking phenomenal. Perfect world, this movie would clean up at the Oscars, but it won't. Let's be real. Wicked is the big thing this year. I'm sure that's gonna take all the Oscars. And hey, before you jump in my comments, I'm not hating on Wicked either. I actually saw the movie. I did enjoy the movie, not as much as I enjoyed Nosferatu, but I get it. But yeah, it would be really cool if there was an upset this year at the Oscars. So yeah, those are my thoughts on this video essay for Nosferatu. If you have thoughts, which I know a lot of you do, please feel free to find out in the comments. I'd be interested to read some of your thoughts, in all honesty. And if you have not subscribed to my channel, you really should, because if you like this, I got more good stuff coming. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. Bye.